This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guest on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Welcome to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Matthew Nu'u-Vali. Matthew, thank you for taking us on your career journey.
I appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to come and take you on it with me.
Awesome. Well, before we find out what you're doing today, let's start at the very beginning, and please tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I've been wrestling with this question. I actually had no dreams of being anything when I was growing up. I was a knucklehead, and so when I was growing up, I actually wanted to be a better knucklehead, a bigger, better knucklehead. To be honest, that's kind of what I grew up as a big kid, and so I just wanted to be the biggest and baddest. I didn't really have any job thoughts growing up, really.
You know, that's interesting. A bigger, better knucklehead. That is a first.
Yeah.
So you just kind of want to be the biggest, baddest guy on the block?
That's it. I wanted to grow up and be the biggest and the baddest. That was everything I did. And at that phase of my life, or growing up, I wasn't making any of the good choices. And so the direction I was headed was, become the biggest and baddest on the street, become the biggest and baddest, because I knew that incarceration was in my future, biggest and baddest going there. And so, yeah, I didn't have a job until I was like 19, so I didn't think anything about working.
Let me ask you this. Why did you feel like incarceration was in your future?
Well, when I was growing up, I started gangbanging at a young age. I grew up in a broken home, divorced parents, and so didn't have any real role models in my life for me to learn from. My dad wasn't there because my mom was hiding us from him, and so I learned everything I learned from the streets and from hanging out with other kids that were making horrible mistakes and smoking and drinking, and so I didn't really have a vision of, I want to grow up and be a police officer, or I want to be a doctor. It was more of, I was in that moment, right? I was there, and I didn't grow up with anyone saying you can be anything. You can be anything and grow up. I grew up with, we're living in the here and now.
Right.
And so at that moment in life, I was just, I'm just going to be as good as I can at being the baddest I can.
Right. No, I could see where you would come from with that attitude.
Yeah.
Without that type of support system around you. Well, you mentioned your first job was at 19. What was your first job?
My first job was for a construction company called Northwest Building Systems. We built manufactured, they were actually government buildings, but we built them in pieces and then flew them in and laid them on top of the foundation.
Okay, like modular homes, but modular buildings?
Yeah, modular, exactly, yeah. That was my first job. Yeah, was doing that.
Now, did that job give you any type of desire to improve or to pursue a career path at that point, or were you still rolling around with other knuckleheads?
No, yeah, so, and I guess I should clarify that. I said 19. 19 was actually a beginning of a different part of my life. I didn't have my first job until I was 24.
Wow.
Which was that Northwest Building Systems job.
Okay.
So that led me, there was a phase in my life where the whole incarceration point, that actually happened. During that portion of my life, I told myself, one of these days I had to teach myself work ethic. And so getting out of incarceration and getting that job in construction was where I put all of my heart and soul into, I want to be the best employee I can be. And then another piece of that is I always told myself, one of these days I'm going to actually make money using my brain. Didn't know I was going to do it, but
right.
One of these days I'm going to make money using my brain. And so that opened up doors for other opportunities, and eventually I landed the job I have now, which I have to use a lot of my brain, and sometimes I don't know if there's enough brain there to use.
Before we get to what you do today, why don't you walk us through, that's pretty fascinating that you were incarcerated and you figured out you wanted to be the best you could be outside. And how did that come about? That seems to be one of the biggest mysteries in, how do we get, folks that are incarcerated turned around? How did you do that? What was the spark that led you down that path?
I was incarcerated from 19 to 24. So when I first got incarcerated or got locked up at 19, for my first year, I hung out with the fellas, and again, my mentality was biggest and baddest. So when in the yard, I wanted to be the biggest and baddest, and it wasn't that hard because I was a 300-pound Samoan, so it wasn't that hard to be the biggest. When I turned about a year and a half into my incarceration, I got in trouble with a correctional officer, and I got sentenced to the hole. And when I got sentenced to the hole, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the hole, but it's 23-hour lockdown with you get an hour of rec time, which is in like a 6x6 cage.
Wow.
And so when I was in there was a window that would look out to the breezeway, which the breezeway is where everyone walks to chow, or you go to the gym, or you go anywhere. And I remember I used to pound on the window, and my boys, who at the time I thought were my boys, they would look at me and they would just drop their head and nod their head and be like, "What is this guy doing?" And that was kind of the first realization for me that I had put my self-worth in the hands of others. And I realized that my self-esteem, everything about me was built on a foundation of other people loving me. And if other people didn't love me, then I didn't love myself, right? That was kind of my aha moment. And so then after that, I went on a real mission of separating myself from letting others control how I felt about myself, and went down a path, was introduced to Christ and was saved. And
was that while you were incarcerated?
I was in the hole, yeah. So during the 30 days I was in the hole, my whole life changed.
Wow.
So when I realized that I had put my self-worth in the hands of others, I sat down and I started crying. And I was bawling. I was like, man, I don't get it. Why do I feel so bad? Because they think I'm an idiot. And I realized, man, I shouldn't feel like an idiot when other people think, I shouldn't feel. I felt lonely in a sense, or really lonely actually, and had realized I gotta take power away from them. My self-worth isn't dependent on anyone else liking or caring about me. Mm-hmm. And so I went on a journey for myself. I realized that I didn't love myself, and I didn't know who I was, and I was 20 years old, and I'm in prison. And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna fall in love with myself. And so I started as little as what was my favorite color, and what I forced myself to do was wrestle with the answers and actually dig deep. I was, a 20-year-old kid, but at the same time, I wanted to come out of prison better than I came in. And so I started wrestling with these questions. And so while I was in the hole, there was only one book that I had, and that was the Bible. And it was an inmate testimony Bible. And so growing up, I wasn't raised Christian. I wasn't raised, with Christ in my life. And so I didn't know how to read the Bible. So what I did was I started kind of flipping through, and between every book in the Bible was a testimony. And my name, Matthew, right, is a part of the gospel. And so when I got to Matthew, there was a testimony that I read that changed my life. And it was about a gangbanger that wanted to be the biggest and the baddest in his neighborhood. He became the shot caller. I'm going to paraphrase it. Became the shot caller. He ended up going to prison. When he went to prison, he wanted to be the biggest and baddest gangster in prison, and he wanted to be the biggest dope dealer in prison. The only place that he could meet with the shot callers from each one of the tiers was in the chapel. And so for months, he would meet in the chapel, and he would give orders to each one of his gang members in each one of the tier on what he wanted to happen, and then he would divvy out the drugs. Months had gone by, and then finally one time he'd gone there, and all the tiers got locked down but his. And he ended up going to the chapel not knowing that all the other tiers were locked down to divvy out orders and divvy out the drugs. And while he was there, he realized that no one was coming. And before he left, the chaplain looked at him and said, "You're getting too old to gangbang. You're getting too old to sling drugs. You're getting too old to live this life. But you never get too old to give your life to Christ." And he talks about in that moment that for the last 3 months, even though he never paid attention to what the pastor and the minister had been saying, subconsciously, it was like the messages all came at once. And so he went back to his cell, and he was wrestling with what the pastor told him. And he said, you know what? He's right. I'm getting too old for this. Mm-hmm. So he flushed his drugs, got down on his knees, and he prayed. And so I read that testimony in tears, of course,
right.
And because it reminded me of who I was growing up and where I was at. And at the end of his story, he ended up getting out of prison, started a church in his neighborhood, and his goal was to unconvert as many gang members as he converted, and to save as many lives and bring people to Christ as fast as possible, and do that all out of love. And so, reading that, I got down on my knees and I said, God, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. Honestly, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I've done it my way for 20 years. Let's give your way a shot.
Right.
And so that was kind of my commitment. I'm walking down this road with you. In the hole, that was kind of also where I realized, like, I didn't love myself. I needed to love myself. I needed to know more about who I am. I didn't have any dreams, no goals, no aspirations, no visions on where I wanted to be in life, and I wanted to change that. And so literally started as little as what was my favorite color, and wrestled with what I thought my favorite color was to make sure that, like, it really was my favorite color, that I really loved that color, and everything from favorite music, favorite books, and wrestled with everything, every question that I ran into for the next 4 years of my incarceration. I wrestled with it to make sure that it was something that I really, really loved, or that was something that was really, really important to me, or something that I could get behind, in a sense. And you're in prison, so there wasn't a whole lot of huge decisions, of course, but I wanted to make sure that I had those steps in me. And so in doing all that, one of the things I realized is that, one, I never had a job. I never cared about a job. My mom, when they got divorced and we moved to Idaho, my mom worked 3 jobs, was never home. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with my mom, but I always told myself, I want work ethic like my mom has work ethic. I want to work like she worked. And so that's what I would tell myself. Hey, listen, if I ever get the opportunity to work, I'm going to give it 100%. And so I just always told myself that. When I get the opportunity to work, I'm going to learn everything. I'm going to bust my butt. I'm going to give it 100%. I'm never going to quit. And I had mentally told myself, you know, my boss is going to get on my nerves. I know it. As long as I know it, just know. Like it was literally like for me, like I continued to coach myself without really knowing the game, the game. You know what I mean?
Right.
I coached myself how to work, but I didn't know how to work. I've never worked.
Right.
And so when I got out, I was fortunate. A really good friend of mine had a job waiting for me when I walked out. And so I walked out, went to work the next day, and was able to put everything that I had coached myself to do into motion. You know, stay hungry, stay willing to learn, be a yes man. When they say do something, just do it, even if you don't like it. That was me teaching myself work ethic. And for me, I feel like I did a pretty good job.
Yeah. Got a couple questions for you as it relates to the hole. So when you went in there, did you bring the Bible in? Was it in there?
No.
And do you still have it?
So in the state of Idaho, where I live, it's a law that there has to be a Bible in every cell, no matter what. And do I still have the Bible? No, because I couldn't take the Bible out of the hole.
Right. Well, it's in a great spot. I mean, if you're in the hole
and
you have that with all those testimonies, it's meant to stay there.
I, to this day, have not been able to find that Bible. I've tried. Just because it's a huge piece of the turning point in my life. And so I won't stop hunting. I'll find it eventually.
Right. So you went into the hole as a 300-pound Samoan knucklehead, biggest, baddest guy out there. You come out of the hole as a born-again Christian with a new work ethic. What happened the next 3 years or so until you got out of prison? How did it go with integrating with your buddies there in prison? How'd that whole thing go?
Well, it was, So I got out of the hole. What was fortunate for me, I was put into a different unit than where my boys were. So I was put into a different unit. So it was literally the epitome of starting fresh, right? And so even though I saw them, it's different because I wasn't live on the same tier with them and the same unit with them. And so when I got out of the hole, I made a commitment to myself to start going to church, made a commitment to myself to start learning how to read the Bible and studying. And so when I got out, I went to this different unit and just kind of separated myself from everybody and told everybody, hey, listen, I'm going to go down this lane with Jesus. And when you're in prison, everybody's like, yeah. Everyone finds Jesus here, and then they leave him at the gate. That's the big thing, right? You're a prison Christian, and then when you're out, you're back to doing what you want.
Right.
And I didn't want to be that. And so I was fortunate. I kind of separated myself from everybody. I was in a different unit, so I didn't see them anyways. And then I created different friends in my unit with guys that were going to the chapel, guys that were studying scriptures, and so it was probably a good year, of me, like 100%. That's all I did, and then running into them off and on, and before someone was like, dude, you're really taking this serious. Like, there is a huge change in you. There's like a glow around you. And that's when I knew that Christ was working in my life. And I was lost and using Christ to be found and was gaining momentum on my spiritual journey. And so I didn't feel like, okay, I'm strong enough, I could bring others, let's go. That's not where I was at. I was continuing to just say, hey, I gotta get this down. I gotta understand. I want to read. I want to learn more. I want to love more. For me, even though I wasn't trying to bring people to Christ, like physically going out and telling them, the way I was studying and the way that I was acting and talking to people, it naturally brought people like, hey, I want to go with you.
Right.
I want to go with you. I want to see what you're seeing. I want to read what you're reading. And so for me, it was awesome how Christ was working in my life there. So then the next 3 years, I got into classes to figure out how to better myself, how to become a better me, essentially. Worked in the gym so that I could physically just stay in shape. And a lot of the decisions I made after the hole were, and it's not, and a lot of people were like, it's cocky. It wasn't really me trying to be cocky, like it's all about me, it's all about me. It was, I knew at that time what was best for me. And so I made decisions that were best for me in the situation I was in.
Right. Okay, that's great. Well, before we move on to our next question, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor.
Do you enjoy your job and find it fulfilling? Or do you spend more time wondering what if instead of what's next? If so, contact Career Spa. Career Spa has extensive programs and curriculum and understands the challenges faced by individuals in transition. They can teach these success practices to be mastered for an effective job search. Answer that what if question by contacting Career Spa and asking their experts, what's next? Contact Career Spa at careerspa.net. Talent acquisition is key to building a successful organization. Talent Connections is a professional services firm that specializes in recruiting, including executive search, contract recruiting, talent acquisition consulting, and recruitment process outsourcing. Whether you are an individual or a Fortune 100 company, Talent Connections can connect you with success. Contact them at talentconnections.net.
Welcome back. So we learned a lot about your childhood and growing up and becoming an adult. And at this point, you're just got out of prison and you've got your first job at the construction company. So if you would, tell us what you do today. And if you would, walk us through, that first job out of prison to where you are today and the different roles or experiences you've received.
My first job, of course, at a construction company. And then from there, I ended up going and working for a cousin of mine and her husband. They built fundraising books for schools. And so they hired me as kind of a cold call sales guy to call on certain companies to get them to buy advertisements in their fundraising book. And I failed horribly. That was my first taste at sales, and I hated it. I didn't want anything to do with sales. And I hated cold calling after the first month. And so I was there for probably a couple months, and then I went back to construction after I realized that using my brain and my voice wasn't going to work. And I was there for another 6 to 8 months, and then I got laid off, and then I ended up going back to work for my cousin or husband. But at that time, they had bought the rights to an energy formula, and so they were going to come out with an energy shot. I was put on the committee to come up with the name and come up with the logo for this energy shot that they were going to release. And so created the name, created the logo, and then about a year later, they ended up selling the brand to two brothers. And during that whole year I was there, I was in like the marketing. I did all the social media, all of the Facebook, Twitter, all of that stuff. And then, so when they sold it, to the new owners, I wanted to go with it because I had actually named the shot. And so the new owners weren't looking for marketing because the owner knew what I did originally. He was looking for sales guys, and he asked me if I wanted to be a sales guy. And I was like, no, I hate sales. But he was like, that's all I'm looking for. And so I was at a Y in the road where I had to either make a decision to become a sales guy, which is something that I was horrible at, or not be a part of the company. And so I said, listen, I can land a specific account. And at that time, he said, I don't have any openings, but if you land an account, you can have a job. And so I told him I can land a specific account. I don't know if you're familiar with Albertsons.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That's a big account to land.
Yeah. So I told him I can land Albertsons. And you know that deep laugh you give someone when they say some BS?
Right.
I got that. And then I left. And the ace up my sleeve that they didn't know is my wife's grandfather used to be the president of Albertsons from 93 to 99. And so I pulled my feather out of the hat and I called on him to see if he could set up a meeting. Long story short, I ended up landing Albertsons and not knowing anything about anything. So I created my job, and today I'm a national sales manager. I oversee key accounts across all 50 states, and then our distribution for grocery and convenience stores.
What's the name of the product?
Yeah, so the company is Rhino Rush Energy. Our energy shots are the fastest growing energy shot brand in the country, going into our 5th year. When the new owners took over, I essentially became the national sales guy. So now I oversee our key business in like Speedway, Circle K's, Core-Mark McLean's, HD Acne, E.B. Brown,
right,
stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And it is a great name, Rhino Rush.
Yeah, which is, that was coming up with Rhino Rush, and then if you've ever seen Rhino Rush products, the logo that's on it, I was a part of it. I was the one who chose the logo.
I just happened to see it, last week when I met you in person for the first time. So yeah, super cool.
Yeah. So it's, for me, it's amazing, right? I was a part of Rhino Rush in its inception. I always dreamt that Rhino Rush would become a national brand, and that I'd be able to see it in convenience stores across the country. And right now I'm in the midst of watching that dream come true. That's amazing. That's a great story. Well, looking back on your career, what would you do differently? And I'm going to be fascinated with your answer here. Well, I don't think I could do anything differently. I was hungry to learn. I didn't want to be in sales, but I made it my mission to learn how to be a salesman because that was the only way I was going to have this job. And so it's hard to say that there's anything that I would change, because I think everything that's happened over the course of the last 6 or some odd years, kind of made me who I am today, right? In sales and business, every lesson I learned, every aches and pain, all the blood, sweat, and tears poured into traveling and kicking in doors and trying to sell an energy shot. Energy shot category is the hardest category to sell. Yeah, it's brutal. Into. Yeah. When we came in, 5 Hour was 99% market share. You're literally trying to sell against like WD-40 of the category. That's how hard it was. Right. And so not only did I get into sales, I also got into sales in convenience stores and grocery in the hardest subcategory for the whole country. There was a lot of lessons learned, man. There was a lot. But what I can say is Rhino Rush, we did it without brokers. All of our relationships across the country we own because we went out and got them. There was no blueprint on how to sell energy shots. It was a team of 3 of us. Today it's still the same 3 guys that oversee the whole United States. Well, if someone wants to be a national sales manager, what advice would you give them? It's funny because not all national sales managers oversee the same footprint that I oversee or do, what I would tell someone, it's not so much about the national sales piece, right? What I've learned is that sales is the lifeblood of any industry, and now, I wouldn't so much strive to be a national sales manager. I would strive just to be a better salesman. Sales transforms a person, right? It gives you strength. It gives you confidence. It gives you the ability. You could take your expertise or your knowledge in sales, in any sales, and go to any industry. And I think that really I would just tell someone, stay hungry to learn how to become a better salesman, and stay hungry to continue to grow. Relationships in this industry are worth $1 million. And when you're honest and you're real and you're a salesperson who sells yourself with your honesty and your loyalty and being real, people buy that.
Yeah, and I agree. And my day job is sales, and I think it gets a bad rap. I think the point is when you're selling appropriately, it's a win-win. You know, you're telling them, here's why our product will help you sell more. You know, it's a win-win. It's not trying to pull something over on someone. You're just making sure you have the best interests of all involved. So, no, I totally agree with what you're saying there. Well, are there any current projects you're working on that you would like to share?
Yeah. So I my biggest vision, we talked a little bit about kind of my youth, right? And so I kind of starting to test my hand at motivational speaking. My dream over the last 9 years has been to be able to go and do motivational talks to troubled youth, because I know what it's like to be a troubled youth. And so I began to kind of go out. I did my first keynote speech about four months ago. And then right now I'm in the middle of a 2-part series that I created for the youth at my church called God's Plan, based off of my life and the lessons that I've learned. So so I'm trying to grow on motivational speaking, keynote speaking side, and be able to use my life as a don't do it kind of template.
Right. Now, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way? Is there a website? Is it a contact number? Is it LinkedIn? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so the best way to reach me, you can send me an email. It's USO, it's USO Rhino Rush. So USO Rhino Rush, RHINO RUSH @gmail.com. That's my personal email. And or if you could find me on LinkedIn, Matthew Nuuvali.
Could you spell your last name for us?
Yeah, it's NUU, V as in Victor, ALI.
Like with most journeys, success largely depends on reliable transportation. And since I'm a huge car enthusiast, could you tell us, what was your first car?
My first car that I bought, which happened when I got out of prison, was a 1996 Grand Jeep Cherokee.
Oh, that's a nice ride.
Yeah. It sounded like it was nice. It got me from point A to point B, that was for sure.
Okay, so it sounds nice. The one you actually got, when you got it, might not have been as fresh off the floor, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
exactly.
Right. Well, what is your dream car if you have one?
Believe it or not, my dream car was a Dodge Charger. And I say was because I was fortunate a couple years ago to buy my dream car.
Oh, nice. Is it like a new one, a daily driver, or is it a classic?
Yeah, it was a 2015 Dodge Charger Hemi, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Well, one perk to some jobs is a company car. So if I had all the money in the world, I'd love to buy a really cool company car, and I'm basing it on what little I know about you and your job. So are you ready for this?
Yes.
So for you, I would pick out the nickname for this car is Godzilla. Have you heard of the Godzilla car?
I've never heard of Godzilla.
Okay. So it is a 1989 to 92 is when they made them. It's a Nissan Skyline GTR. Now, they make the new GTRs, but this is the classic one that received its nickname of Godzilla. But it's super fast, super powerful, amazing car that won all sorts of races over there in Japan for years. And it got the nickname Godzilla. We never had it here in the United States, but it's hit the 25-year rule now, so we're starting to see some classics get imported. So we're starting to see them on the roads now. And the new version is the Nissan GTR, which has like 640 horsepower and is an absolute beast. So that's the car I would pick for you. It just, to me, it kind of, Rhino Rush, you're a big guy. It's a powerful car. It's got a great nickname. I just felt that would be a great company car for you.
Yeah, I like it. Godzilla.
Yeah, it's a 4-door with a trunk, so you could put all the Rhino Rush you want into it, so you can call on customers in a fast and efficient way.
Right. Race to them quickly. I like it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Matthew, for taking us on your career journey. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley LFO. And we will see you soon as we learn from others together.